We all need help from time to time, whether it's having someone feed our cats while we're out of town, or helping in our maniacal quest to wipe out half of the universe's population. While Thanos was a big bad of Infinity War and Endgame, he couldn't get to where he was without the help of the Black Order. Hey, the Avengers needed some baddies to beat up on, right? Okay, that's not fair. Thanos' Black Order is actually pretty cool. So today's video is all about breaking down the scariest group of henchmen we've seen yet in the MCU. Like, did you know one member was missing completely? Why is that? Well, let's get into it right now, folks. When adapting a comic book to the big screen, there's always the tricky question of how faithfully you adapt the characters. As much as we all want to see accurate depictions of our favorite superheroes and villains, sometimes it's necessary to make changes in order to make a more streamlined and understandable story. Because let's face it, comic books can get a little convoluted when you've been telling stories with these characters for over 70 years. The MCU has always been willing to cut corners in their storytelling if it fits the story better. Remember Guardians of the Galaxy 2? Yeah, Ego the Living Planet claimed to be a Celestial and also turned out to be Peter Quill's father. Any big fan of Ego or the Guardians from the comics knows that isn't exactly comic accurate. But does it really matter? It was still a fun movie and it told its story effectively. But what about Thanos' Black Order? Were they adapted faithfully, or were they the result of more corner cutting? Well, the answer is a little bit of both. Avengers Infinity War had a lot going on in case you don't remember, including establishing Thanos as the biggest threat the MCU has ever seen. So wouldn't it be a little counterproductive to build up his Black Order as well? The focus rightfully needed to be on the big purple alien that Peter Quill lovingly referred to as Grimace. So although there wasn't really time to get into the personalities of all the members, they were at least formidable foes for our heroes. Let's talk about the Black Order now. Who are they and how did they come to be a part of Thanos' inner circle? Well, there really only seem to be two primary requirements to be a spot on his twisted team. One, you have to be okay with answering to Thanos and going on quests to retrieve bright glowing stones for him. Two, you have to have something in your name that tells people you're associated with the color black. The members we see in the movie are Ebony Maw, Cull Obsidian, Proxima Midnight, and Corvus Glaive. But right away we have some questions. First and foremost, why is that one dude named Corvus Glaive? A corvus is a genus of birds which includes things like crows and ravens. How in the heck does this mutated elf thing know that? Same with Proxima Midnight. Do they have time constructs in outer space? What does midnight even mean when you're constantly traveling through space, huh? This is a franchise where gamma radiation turned a man into a hulking green monster, and people invented time travel. But aliens with names that could only come from Earth is where we draw the line. But of all the members we saw in the movie, only one really made a memorable impression, and that's because he looked like Squidward. The scrawny prawn-looking dude who first arrived on Earth to do battle with Iron Man, Doctor Strange, and Spider-Man was Ebony Maw, Thanos' top lieutenant. Although he didn't look as physically imposing as the other members of the group, he was an extremely powerful telepath who could move stuff with his mind. He almost got the Time Stone away from Doctor Strange until a young kid from Queens with knowledge of the really old movie Aliens helped blast him out of an airlock. Turns out squids freeze in space. Calamari. Then you have the other three, Cull Obsidian, Proxima Midnight, and Corvus Glaive. All three of which weren't exactly memorable but proved to be solid threats that were major thorns in the other Avengers' sides. Now here's probably the biggest difference between the MCU Black Order and the comics version of the Black Order. Cull Obsidian isn't the character's name in the comics. It's actually known as Black Dwarf. Cull Obsidian was another name for the Black Order itself, but for the movie they took some liberties and made Black Dwarf Cull Obsidian instead. Why did they do this? Do you think the producers just fell in love with the name Cull Obsidian and had to have it as one of the characters? Because sure, we admit it's an awesome name. We wanted to change our name to Cull Obsidian, but that didn't really roll off the tongue, did it? Or maybe they made the change so people like us could make a YouTube video about it. Thanks, Marvel. No, more likely than not, the reason they changed Black Dwarf's name to Cull Obsidian is out of sensitivity. Having a name like that might open up Marvel to complaints of insensitivity, and just to avoid the situation altogether, it was definitely the right move on their part. And again, Cull Obsidian is way cooler than the name Black Dwarf. Okay, full disclosure, we had to Google exactly what obsidian was, and it turns out it's a naturally occurring volcanic glass. That's pretty awesome. Science, right? And that goes back to how the team was originally called Cull Obsidian in the comics. It actually had a different translation than just really cool volcanic rock. It actually originally meant Midnight Slaughter. But that was a little too harsh to its members who thought it was foreboding. Because yeah, if you work for the Mad Titan and bring terror and doom across the universe, you obviously want to at least have a fun name to let people know you can still party. And maybe they didn't like it because it translated to Midnight Slaughter. That's a little confusing. Do they do their slaughtering only at midnight? That seems like an inopportune time. What if they get a chance to slaughter during the day? Do they have to wait? Again, we have so many questions that Marvel will probably never answer now. But an important element about the Black Order is to mention how rich their history is in the comics. I mean, all we saw in the movies is 4 kinda strong henchmen without much personality, but the actual comic version has more members, more variety, and a deeper history. They're sorta like the Avengers for evil space aliens. Let's talk about the first Thanos version because it's the one that mostly matches what we saw, meaning Black Dwarf, who we now know the movie changed to Cull Obsidian, Corvus Glaive, Ebony Maw, Proxima Midnight, and a 5th member that we're gonna wait to talk about. Stick around to find out more. But after that version of the Black Order was defeated and the multiverse was reconstructed, Thanos went AWOL. So Corvus Glaive, Thanos' most favored general in the comics, decided that, hey, forming a Black Order worked great for Thanos, why not give it a try myself? So good old Glavey formed the second version of the Black Order, rounding out his new crew with some of the worst criminals in the universe, with the goal of creating his own empire. Some key members of this version was a group called the Coven, a trio of unnamed witches that in our heads were just the witches from Hocus Pocus. But of course this version didn't last long as Thanos eventually came back and wasn't too happy with Corvus Glaive taking control of things. And rather than suffer the wrath of Thanos, Glaive took his own life, leaving Thanos to once again assume control of the Black Order. See? Doesn't Corvus Glaive sound like an interesting character? You would have never known any of that just based off the movie, where the most interesting thing he did was fake his demise and go after Shuri in the Battle of Wakanda. There were a few other versions of the Black Order out there, but you get the idea. They were a serious, well-developed threat in the comics, but ultimately were nothing more than fluffy punching bags for the Avengers. But that wasn't supposed to be the case. We're not the only ones who were disappointed about the Black Order representation. A fan brought up the very issue to the directors themselves, and they answered how people came to see Avengers Infinity War to see all their favorite heroes together on the big screen for the first time ever. Not to see the rise of the Black Order, which we get, but we still wish there was a little bit more to make them memorable. If they had followed the comics just a little bit more, the Black Order could have been a much bigger threat. Or at the very least, you'd remember their names and which one was which. But now on to our absolute biggest problem with the version of the Black Order in the MCU. They left out an important 5th member. We mentioned it earlier, but the original Black Order also had the mentally unstable telepath known as SuperGiant on their side. Out of all the members of the Black Order, we're the saddest this was the one they chose to leave out because she's actually really cool. Not only is she a powerful psychic, but she's basically a parasite who seeks out intellect and eats it like shrimp at an all-you-can-eat buffet. She can mind control people too, so it's just an all-around better idea that you avoid her like the plague. But why wasn't SuperGiant included in Avengers Infinity War? It's not like the writers and directors forgot all about her. She was even there in the story in an earlier draft of the movie when all the Black Order members had specific backstories. Of course, we know those were cut to make time for our heroes, but it looks like the decision was made to cut out SuperGiant altogether. Can you really blame them? The Black Order is already so easily forgettable that adding another one seemed to be a little pointless. But it's also a little sad. Ebony Maw was the team's only psychic, and he was dealt with pretty early on in the movie. But that left us without one really cool psychic battle. How great would it have been to see SuperGiant fight in the Battle of Wakanda with Scarlet Witch? Wanda Maximoff is a character whose powers definitely need further explanation because the MCU hasn't really bothered to define what exactly her powers are. She's supposed to be able to mind control people too, but that's something we haven't seen since Age of Ultron. You know, back when she had a much heavier accent. Now Scarlet Witch mostly stands around looking fierce and making red energy balls with her hands, which is cool and all, but doesn't mean we want more of it. Maybe we all just love psychic fights. Or is the reason they left out SuperGiant is because there is a bigger plan at play here? Could the bigwigs at Marvel have made the decision to cut SuperGiant because they want to save the villain for a future film? It's definitely a possibility. She doesn't necessarily scream big bad material, but SuperGiant has the potential to be one of the best henchmen the MCU has ever seen. Which, if you think about it, is the next problem that the MCU needs to fix. The franchise started off with less than compelling main baddies besides Loki. But they were eventually able to fix that problem with a handful of three-dimensional villains like Killmonger and Vulture. They look like they cracked the formula, but now it's time to master the second-in-command role. Remember Sonny Birch? Remember Scourge? Even Black Panther wasted Ulysses Claw in some capacity. What we're saying is that the MCU movie casts have now grown so big, you can't just have one main antagonist anymore. You need at least a secondary one that the secondary characters can beat. And having SuperGiant in a future movie as a second-in-command would go a long way to start fixing this problem if done right. But where would be the best place for SuperGiant? Could she be the Herald of Galactus? Or an ally of Annihilus? Or even someone who's helping Dr. Doom run his country with tyranny and fear? There are so many places you can put her, and we hope that Marvel deciding to cut her from Avengers Infinity War and Endgame means there's bigger plans with the character in the future. We're SuperGiantic fans of SuperGiant, so we'll continue holding out hope for the future. Overall, if we hadn't made it clear, we wanted more of the Black Order thanks to their awesome comic book counterparts, and hopefully, there's still more that can be done with a few of the characters down the line. What do you think? Do you want more from the Black Order? Let us know in the comments below, and be sure to hit that subscribe button for more awesome MCU content. As always, thanks for watching.